Shalom, welcome to our class. Tonight we will talk about the commandment, you shall not murder. And right away I have a question. Is the commandment, you shall not murder, applicable to the contemporary disciples? Why am I asking this? Actually, it's very simple. It looks like we do not kill too much. I would say I do not kill anyone. And in this case, it would be reasonable to say, oh, well, this commandment is important, but not applicable. Have you heard such statements as, like, Yeshua abolished the law? Maybe he abolished this commandment? Well, let's read the words of our teacher, but before we do that, let me summarize our previous lectures. We remember that Yeshua came to bring the covenant of God exactly like Moses or Moshe. We found it. Number 2, blessings begin the covenant. Number 3, the disciples are the salt and the light of the covenant. And again, we have this covenantal language. And also, we covered a very important topic. Yeshua says, do not think that I came to abolish. So, he didn't come to abolish, and now let's open his words and let us study Yeshua's teaching, what he teaches us. We read in Matthew chapter 5 verse 21 these words, you have heard it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever commits murder shall be subject to judgment. Sadly, very sadly, today you open many biblical commentaries, you listen to biblical sermons, and many scholars perceive these words as a quotation of the text taken from the Torah. In other words, they say that Yeshua here just quotes the Torah. However, it is likely that Yeshua is talking about teaching or about someone's interpretation or traditional instructions. And I am glad that today many scholars come to this conclusion. How do we know that? Is this our educated guess or we have some proof? Yes, we do have some proof. Yeshua doesn't contradict the Torah. Now we understand better the words do not think. Just last meeting we had this discussion, we had this text, we studied that. Do not think that I came to abolish. He didn't come to abolish. He is not debating something taken from the Torah. He is debating something which is interpreted. And in order to prove that, I would like to look at the words of our teacher. As you can see here in this text, we read, you have heard, it was, and then a word which is highlighted. It was said to those of old. Was it written to them or said? Let me read 2 biblical verses. Matthew chapter 7 verse 24. Therefore Yeshua says, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. As you can see here, Yeshua says that people who are near him, they hear his words. He preaches, he teaches, and they hear his words. At the same time, in Mark chapter 12 verse 26, we find an important detail, and this detail says, but concerning the dead being raised, haven't you read in the book of Moses? Look at this. When Yeshua teaches, he says, therefore everyone who hears these words. When Yeshua refers to the Torah, he asks, haven't you read in the book of Moses? And this is very important. We have rabbinic parallels, and they show that the men of old can be biblical authorities. In other words, it was not just told by God to the men of old, but one group of rabbis told to another group of rabbis, these are the men of old, and I'm very glad this is a scholarly opinion. So those men of old, they are not just people who received the commandments of Moses, but this is a group of ancient rabbis who was receiving some teaching from another group of rabbis. And we base our presupposition on this important key element. It was said, it was not written. And I remember there was one discussion, and a religious Jew was there. He participated in this discussion, and he said, so are you talking about tradition and interpretation? We said yes. And he said, I always perceived these words of Jesus as the words set against the Torah. But now I see that Yeshua was debating and arguing against certain interpretations. It was a Talmudic discussion. And if it was the case, this Jew said, it's perfectly fine. So the key issue is this. Some people, if not majority, believe that Yeshua canceled the Torah and brought the new teaching. However, the truth is, he didn't come to abolish. That's why he highlighted this fact, because many people would believe he come to abolish. No way. He says, I didn't come to abolish, but to fulfill. And now Yeshua starts teaching. He is not trying to cancel the commandments of Moshe, of Moses. He is trying to improve and to correct someone's interpretation. Why do I say that this is important? It's important because we should understand he is teaching us how to keep commandments, not how to cancel and to trash them. So, Yeshua is not criticizing the Torah, he corrects the people's understanding and application of it. Well, let's highlight another key word. You shall not murder. Hebrew has many words for killing. The words found in Exodus chapter 20, where we find the 10 commandments or 10 words, and especially, particularly, I am talking about verse 13. These words actually communicate a very important message. Ratzach, and Ratzach means to kill, to murder, to strike down, to slay. What is the message? The message is, when we talk about killing in Exodus chapter 20, verse 13, we have the following connotation. This is something premeditated and done deliberately. So this doesn't apply to killing animals. It cannot be applied to protecting a home or accidental killing. This is something which was carefully considered. This is the problem. And Yeshua is addressing the key issue. But I tell you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be subject to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raka, shall be subject to the council. And whoever says, you fool, shall be subject to fiery Gehenna. The authority of Yeshua is highlighted here. He says, but I tell you, and then we read who is angry with his brother. And now we have a problem. We agree it's very bad to kill. But how can we avoid being angry with our brothers? It's very easy to, it's very easy not to be angry with someone who lives in Alaska, right? But if someone lives nearby, you get angry very often. Whoever commits murder says Yeshua, shall be subject to judgment. And then he says, who is angry with his brother shall be subject to judgment. In other words, Yeshua makes murder and being angry with the brother equal. He intensifies the commandment of Moshe instead of canceling it. Let's look at another words, Raka and you fool. Let me remind you that Judea was the shame and honor society. And actually to say offensive words was much worse than in our society. Raka, empty-headed, it was very offensive and insulting. And the council, Sanhedrin in the original text, was supposed to judge the person who says, you are empty-headed. Can you imagine this? Today, the American Supreme Court is hearing every time when someone offended a person. I believe they will never end their hearings. The same applies to the second offensive word, you fool. So, number one, Yeshua says, do not be angry. Number two, he says, you cannot use those words when you talk with your brother. And then the altar is mentioned. The altar, which is the key element of this discourse. Therefore, if you are presenting your offering upon the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering. Actually, rabbinic discussions about interrupting the guilt offering, they were famous. Some rabbis would say that it was necessary to interrupt the guilt offering in cases where the stolen property was not returned. We have also Philo's statements about examining oneself before this person goes and approaches the altar of God. But also, I have a question. Why does Yeshua talk about the guilt offering in the context of killing or committing murder? Why? Let's analyze these details. Murder, altar, brother, offering. This is in the text. Who comes to our mind? I would say Cain. And along with Cain, his brother Abel comes. The idea is, if I hate my brother, and even if I'm angry with my brother, my offering, instead of cleansing me, will provoke me to kill the brother. I believe we have a parallel here. It's not the only parallel, but I believe there is a hint. And this teaches us, if you are angry, your sacrifice will not work. Yeshua is our sacrifice, and his sacrifice will not work for us unless we forgive our brothers and sisters. Make friends quickly with your opponent while you are with him on the way. Otherwise, your opponent may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the assistant, and you will be thrown into prison. As for me, I tend to prove that I am right. But Yeshua says, admit quickly when you are wrong. He says, do not be concerned about your rightness. Are you right or not does not matter. He says, make friends quickly. Amen, I tell you, you will never get out of there until you have paid back the last penny. Well, someone who brings the guilt offering is supposed to make restitution, and what is important, to do it proportionally. Yeshua says that if I refuse to make friends and go to the altar, I will be caught and put to prison, and then my restitution will not be proportional. I will give how much? Let's see in the text. All. What does it mean? It looks like, this sounds like I lose everything if I do not forgive. In other words, I lose my salvation. This is how I interpret the last penny. This commandment is a part of the covenant, and my life depends on keeping this commandment. What is our practice? Let us highlight the commandments found in this text. Do not be angry with your brother, and it's a part of our covenant with God. My salvation depends on that. Be reconciled. This is what Yeshua commands us. And make friends quickly. If you need reconciliation, when should you do this? Right after our meeting. Yeshua says, quickly. What a beautiful commandment. Yeshua elevates the commandment, you shall not murder, to the level of our hearts. This is what it means. I will write this commandment on your hearts.